If you've ever stared at your ceiling at 2:17 in the morning and thought, okay, so what's the point of all this? You already understand the problem Albert Camus spent his life circling like a moth around a porch light. Not the poetic version of that thought, the plain, almost embarrassing version. The one you don't post. The one that shows up when you finish something you swore would finally fix you. Graduate, get the job, move out, get in shape, get the relationship. And the moment after the relief, the silence creeps in again. And here's the part nobody says out loud. It's not always sadness. Sometimes it's just flat. Like the world didn't end, but it also didn't begin. Like you're doing life correctly, and it still doesn't feel like anything. If that's you, I'm not going to hand you a pep talk. I'm not going to tell you everything happens for a reason, like the universe is a customer service rep with a script. Camus wouldn't do that either. He'd do something weirder, and honestly, more respectful. He'd admit the world doesn't seem to owe us meaning, and then he'd ask what we're going to do with that. Because here's the hook I want you to hold on to. Camus didn't write to make you feel inspired. He wrote to make you feel less lied to. And once you stop being lied to, something unexpectedly powerful happens. Let's start with the most uncomfortable idea, because it's the doorway to all of it. Camus says the core philosophical question is whether life is worth living, not how to live well, not what's my purpose, not what's the meaning of suffering, whether you should even bother. That sentence hits like cold water, and you might think, that's too dark, that's not me. But if you've ever drifted through days like you're watching your own life from the outside, if you've ever caught yourself thinking, if I disappeared, the world would keep turning, then you've at least brushed up against the question. Camus calls the feeling behind it the absurd. Now, absurd doesn't mean silly, like clowns or memes. It means something more like the mismatch, the collision, the argument between two things that can't agree. On one side, you, a meaning-hungry animal, a creature that can't help but ask why. Why am I here? Why do I feel this way? Why do people hurt each other? Why do I want things and then get bored? Why does time pass so fast and so slow at the same time? On the other side, the universe, silent, neutral, no explanation, no final answer, no sign on the wall that says, here's what this was all for. Absurdity is what happens when your need for meaning meets a world that doesn't answer, and you feel it in moments that are almost mundane. You wake up, wash your face, scroll, eat, work, answer messages, repeat, and then one day, mid-routine, the routine breaks open like a cheap costume, and you see it from the outside. You go, wait, this is it? This is what we do? And you don't even mean it dramatically. It's just sudden clarity, like your brain took a step back and got honest. Or you accomplish something and it doesn't land. You get what you wanted, and you still feel like you're missing something. And now you're not just missing something, you're missing a reason to keep chasing. Or you lose someone, and the world doesn't pause. Traffic still moves. People still laugh in restaurants. Your grief feels cosmic, and the world feels indifferent. And that contrast is absurdity in your bones. Camus is saying, yes, that feeling is real. You're not crazy. You're not uniquely broken. You're noticing something most people learn to numb. Now, once you notice the absurd, you have a problem. Because if the universe won't give you meaning, you can't just unsee that. The question comes back, what do you do? Camus says we basically try three routes. The first route is what he calls physical suicide. You decide, consciously or quietly, that if there's no meaning, there's no point. He doesn't treat this lightly. He doesn't talk about it like it's a debate club topic. He treats it like the raw fact that some people reach that edge. But his argument is surprising. He says suicide is not the solution to the absurd. It's an escape from the question, not an answer to it. It's like ripping the page out of the book because you don't like the chapter. And if you've ever been close to that edge, I want to say something very plainly. Camus isn't calling you weak. He's saying the question you're facing is serious. Serious enough that you deserve more than an exit sign. Serious enough that it deserves a different kind of courage. The second route is what he calls philosophical suicide. And this one is more common than you think. Philosophical suicide is when you can't stand the silence of the universe, so you force an answer. You grab a belief system, not because it's true, necessarily, but because it makes the discomfort stop. It can be religion. It can be ideology. It can be hustle culture. It can be manifestation. It can be cynicism. Cynicism is a belief system too, by the way. It's anything that says, no, I know the reason. I know the big story. I know what all this means. It's that leap, that refusal to sit with not knowing. Now, careful. Camus isn't saying faith is dumb. He's not calling religious people idiots. He's not doing that edgy internet atheist thing. He's making a more specific point. If you use an answer to avoid the absurd instead of facing it, you're trading honesty for comfort. And he thinks that trade costs you something vital. Because when you accept a ready-made meaning just to numb the ache, you stop living in direct contact with reality. You live through a filter, and sometimes that filter makes you cruel, or rigid, or scared, or weirdly empty, even while you're certain. So he rejects both kinds of suicide, physical and philosophical, which leaves the third route. And this is the route that makes Camus kind of dangerous, in the best way. He says, what if you don't escape? What if you stay? What if you look the absurd in the face and refuse to pretend it isn't there? What if you live without appeal? That phrase is important. Living without appeal means you stop appealing to some higher court for meaning. You stop begging the universe for a verdict that says, you did it right. You stop waiting for reality to justify itself. And when you stop waiting for that, you become strangely free. But not the cheesy freedom where you run through a field and everything's golden. It's a sharper, cleaner freedom. The freedom of someone who stopped asking permission to exist. Camus gives us an image for this. Sisyphus. You probably know the myth, but let's say it in a way that actually hits. Sisyphus is condemned by the gods to roll a boulder up a mountain. Every time he gets near the top, it slips. It falls. He walks down. He does it again. Forever. If you've ever had a job that eats your weeks, if you've ever dealt with anxiety that resets every morning, if you've ever tried to build a better life and felt like you're dragging the same rock up the same slope, you get it. Sisyphus is the symbol of repetitive human effort in a world that doesn't reward it with final meaning. And Camus says, we must imagine Sisyphus happy. That line gets misunderstood. People think it means be happy no matter what, like it's some inspirational poster. No, Camus is saying something much more specific. Sisyphus becomes bigger than his punishment the moment he becomes conscious of it and refuses to be broken by it. The key moment isn't pushing the rock. The key moment is the walk back down the mountain. That's when Sisyphus knows exactly what his fate is. There's no hope that it ends. No surprise reward. No, maybe tomorrow. Just the full clarity. This is my life. And in that clarity, Camus imagines Sisyphus choosing his stance. Choosing to say, you can give me the rock, but you can't make me agree that it owns my soul. That's the rebellion. Rebellion, for Camus, isn't overthrowing governments, though it can overlap. It's the inner refusal to let the absurd turn you into a ghost. It's you saying, I see that life has no guaranteed meaning, and I'm still here. I'm still going to live. Not because I'm delusional, but because I'm defiant. Now, before we go further, we have to address a trap. When people hear nothing matters, they often slide into nihilism. Like, cool, so everything is pointless, so I can do whatever, so why care? But Camus isn't a nihilist. He's not saying nothing matters in the sense that nothing has value. He's saying nothing matters in the cosmic, pre-written, stamped by God sense. And that difference is everything. Here's a simple way to feel it. If nothing matters cosmically, then you're not auditioning for some invisible judge. You're not collecting points for the afterlife scoreboard. You're not obligated to live a certain narrative. But it doesn't follow that your choices are meaningless. It means your choices are yours. Meaning stops being something you discover like buried treasure. It becomes something you make like bread. And bread is messy. It's not perfect. Sometimes it burns. Sometimes it's flat. But it's real. You can eat it. You can share it. It matters because it touches a human life. Camus is trying to bring meaning down from the heavens and back into the dirt where we actually live. So what does that look like, practically, in a world where nothing is guaranteed to matter? Camus would say it looks like three things: lucidity, freedom, passion. Lucidity is honesty. You don't lie to yourself about reality. You don't sugarcoat the absurd. You see the world as it is: beautiful, brutal, indifferent, full of love and randomness and loss. This alone changes you, because so much suffering comes from insisting reality should be something else. Freedom is what happens when you stop appealing. If there's no final script, you're freer than you thought. Not free from consequences, don't get it twisted. Free from the demand to justify your life to the universe. Passion is intensity, not in a motivational way, in a living way. If there's no eternal meaning, then the present becomes heavier, more precious, more vivid, not because it's all you have in a doom way, but because it's the only place life actually happens. Now, if you're listening and thinking, okay, that's nice philosophy, but I have bills and stress and social anxiety and my brain won't shut up, good. Let's bring it down to ground level. Imagine you're at a party. You're smiling. You're doing the little social performance. People ask, so what do you do? And you answer like a resume, and you laugh at things that aren't funny. And then you go home, and suddenly you feel empty, like you were acting in a play you didn't write. That emptiness is not proof you're broken. It's proof you're conscious. The absurd is basically your soul refusing to become a prop. Or think about scrolling. You can lose an hour, 2 hours, and when you stop, you feel this weird shame, like you were asleep while awake. You didn't even enjoy it, but you did it anyway. Camus would call that a kind of living death, not dramatic, just unconsciousness. And his whole project is waking up. Lucidity means you catch yourself mid-scroll and go, oh, I'm trying to numb the absurd. And maybe you still scroll sometimes, because you're human, but now you see it. And seeing it gives you a choice. Or think about ambition. If you're the kind of person who wants to build something, create, grow, win, you know how quickly purpose can turn into a cage. You tell yourself, once I hit that milestone, I'll finally feel okay. And then you hit it, and it's like eating a rice cake. You chew for a while and realize there's nothing there. Camus would say, the problem isn't that you're ungrateful. The problem is you were expecting your achievement to answer a cosmic question it can't answer. No number can tell you why you exist. No applause can make the universe speak. So instead of using goals as a meaning machine, Camus would say, treat them as a game you choose to play. That sounds small, but it's huge. Because games can be serious without being sacred. You can put your whole heart into something while still knowing it doesn't make you worthy. That's freedom. And then there's suffering. This is where Camus gets misunderstood as cold. He's not cold. He just refuses to romanticize pain. He doesn't say suffering is good. He doesn't say it's meant to happen. He doesn't say it's character development handed to you by fate. He says it happens. And it's unfair. And the universe doesn't care. And somehow, in that bluntness, some people feel a strange relief. Because if suffering isn't a message, you can stop trying to decode it like it's a riddle. You can grieve without asking what it teaches. You can be angry without needing to turn it into wisdom immediately. You can just be human. Now you might be wondering, if Camus rejects big cosmic meaning, What stops you from falling into emptiness anyway? What stops you from turning into someone who shrugs at everything? Here's the twist. Camus thinks the absurd can actually make you more alive, not less. Because once you stop searching for a final meaning, you can start paying attention to immediate meaning. The warmth of coffee. A friend texting you something dumb, and it actually makes you smile. The way your body feels after you walk outside, and your lungs remember they can breathe. The fact that you can sit with someone and be honest for 10 minutes, and the honesty itself is a form of meaning. These things don't need to be eternal to be real. Camus is basically saying, stop demanding that life justify itself in the language of eternity. Let it speak in the language of moments. And yeah, moments are fragile. That's part of why they matter. Now let's talk about rebellion again, because this is where the philosophy becomes a stance you can actually use on a random Tuesday. Rebellion is not optimism. Optimism says, it'll work out. Rebellion says, even if it doesn't, I'm still gonna live with my eyes open. Optimism depends on outcomes. Rebellion doesn't. And that's why rebellion is stronger. If you're someone who's been burned by hope, like you hoped for something, and it didn't happen, and now you're scared to hope again, rebellion might fit you better. It doesn't ask you to believe the future will be kind. It asks you to decide who you are in the face of whatever comes. Let me make this personal without getting cringe. There are days when you wake up and everything feels pointless. Not tragic, just pointless. Like you could do all the right things and still feel nothing. On those days, people will tell you to find your why. Camus would say, maybe your why is not something you find. Maybe it's something you do. Maybe your why is that you refuse to let the pointlessness win. Maybe your why is that you're going to make a small act of meaning anyway. Not because it solves the universe, because it's your rebellion. And sometimes rebellion looks tiny. It looks like taking a shower when you don't want to. It looks like writing one paragraph. It looks like calling your mother back even though you're tired. It looks like stepping outside instead of rotting in your room. Not because these actions are holy, but because they're yours. Camus doesn't need you to be a hero. He needs you to be awake. Now, something else Camus does that I really respect. He doesn't pretend this is easy. There's no secret handshake where the absurd becomes fun. Sometimes the absurd feels like sand in your mouth. Sometimes you'll feel like you're doing all this awake living and still getting hit with waves of emptiness. That doesn't mean you failed. It means the human condition is not a problem you solve once. It's a tension you live inside. So, okay, if we accept that, how do we live without becoming either depressed or delusional? Camus gives us a clue when he talks about creating meaning without lying. He's into art. He's into love. He's into experience. He's into the physical world. Because these are places where meaning exists without pretending it's eternal. Think about music. A song ends. That doesn't make it pointless. In fact, part of why it hits is because it ends. Think about a conversation that changes you. It's not stamped into the fabric of the cosmos, but it rearranges your life anyway. Meaning doesn't need permanence. It needs impact. This is where I want to be careful, because there's a trendy version of Camus that turns into, so just do whatever feels good. Like he's the patron saint of reckless freedom. That's not it. Camus's freedom is paired with responsibility, because you're not the only conscious creature here. If there's no cosmic meaning, then human meaning matters more, not less, because we're the ones who feel. We're the ones who bleed. We're the ones who love and lose. So cruelty becomes even more absurd because it's suffering added on top of suffering with no divine justification. Kindness becomes rebellious because it's meaning created in a meaningless world. This is why Camus talks about solidarity. He's not just an individual freedom guy. He's also a we're in this together guy. Because the absurd isn't your private problem. It's a shared condition. You and I are both on the mountain. Different rocks, same gravity. Now let's do a quick experiment in your head. Imagine the universe actually did have a clear meaning. Imagine there was a big sign in the sky that said, "The purpose of life is X." Everyone agreed. Everyone knew. Would that make you feel better? Maybe at first. But also, what happens to you then? You'd become a worker in someone else's plan. You'd live like an employee. You'd measure yourself constantly against the sign. You'd feel guilty whenever you wandered. A lot of people think certainty would save them, but certainty can also suffocate them. The absurd, as painful as it is, gives you room. And in that room, you can decide. Not once, but again and again. Now I want to talk about the sentence that people secretly carry like a weight. I'm wasting my life. That thought is everywhere. It's in productivity culture. It's in social media. It's in comparisons. It's in that panicked feeling when you realize you're aging. Camus has an answer that doesn't feel like a lecture. He would say, the only real waste is unconsciousness. Not in a mystical way, in a practical way. If you sleepwalk through your days, chasing meanings you don't believe in, living for approval you don't even want, repeating routines without ever choosing them, then, yeah, there's a kind of waste there. But if you're awake, even in pain, even confused, even not sure what you're doing, there's less waste than you think, because being awake means you're actually living your life, not just performing it. And here's a retention moment I want to hit you with, because if you remember one thing from all of this, let it be this. Camus doesn't promise you meaning. He offers you honesty, and then he offers you a way to live that honesty without collapsing. That's rare. Most people either lie to you with certainty or leave you with emptiness. Camus says, stay in the middle, don't escape, don't pretend, don't quit, revolt. Now, what does revolt look like when you're not a philosopher in a trench coat? It looks like building a life you don't need to justify. It looks like choosing your values as if you were writing them, not discovering them. It looks like admitting you don't know the point and still caring about people. It looks like holding two truths at once. Yes, the universe is silent, and yes, your life can still be full. Full doesn't mean constantly happy. Full means vivid. Full means real. Let's get even more specific. If you want to live Camus' philosophy in the simplest way, try this 3-part practice, not as a system, just as a stance. First, name the absurd when it shows up. When you feel that what's the point fog, don't immediately medicate it with noise. Just notice it. Oh, this is the absurd again. That alone creates a little space between you and the spiral. Second, refuse the cheap escape. The cheap escape might be doom scrolling, or fantasies, or convincing yourself you don't care about anything, or clinging to some rigid story just to feel safe. You don't have to ban these things from your life. Just don't let them become your religion. Third, make one act of meaning. 1, not 10, not a transformation montage. One act that says, even if nothing matters cosmically, I'm here, and I choose this. It could be creative. It could be relational. It could be physical. It could be helping someone. It could be cleaning your space. It could be studying. It could be resting on purpose instead of collapsing by accident. The key is, you choose it. Choice is rebellion. Now you might be thinking, okay, but what if I don't feel like choosing? What if I'm tired? Yeah, sometimes you will be. Camus isn't asking you to feel powerful all the time. He's asking you to not hand your agency over to the void. Even tired choice counts. Even small choice counts. Sometimes rebellion is just refusing to let your despair become your identity. And if you're someone who's been through a lot, you might hear that and think, easy to say. You're right to be skeptical. So let me say it differently. Camus doesn't erase your pain. He doesn't explain it. He doesn't justify it. He stands beside you in it and says, I won't insult you with fake answers, but I also won't abandon you to emptiness. That's what makes this philosophy feel human. It's not a ladder out of the hole. It's a way to breathe while you're in it.